I'm going to talk about fishing inshore ICW, flats, and creeks. Does anybody know what the ICW isn't? You know what it is, right? It's the intercoastal waterway. It's the main river when you go over the toll bridge. You got a lot of docks and good drop-off banks in the ICW. The time I like to fish the ICW is during the week when there's not that many people out in the water. Because you have, I mean, if you're fishing the banks, you got boats going by you constantly. It just isn't fun. But if you can get out there at night and fish the dock lights, it's very productive with snook, redfish, trout. You know, just throwing top water or jerk bait. And if you're a bait fisherman, you know, if I'm going to throw bait, I'll throw the top water with like a shrimp or a mullet, mud minnow, and just throw it around the dock. And when I fish the ICW, I don't like fishing it when it's in the middle of the tide. I like it slack tide because it moves so quick in the ICW that I like to fish it like an hour before slack and an hour after slack tide. And slack tide is when there's no water moving. It's in the change of the tides. And the reason why I like to do that is because the bait stays in the strike zone a lot longer. If the tide's moving real quick, you got to keep casting up current and letting that bait go by the strike zone. And it only has maybe 2 seconds of going by that strike zone, so you got to keep reeling up and casting. So that's why I like to fish slack tide in the ICW, because it's just easier. It makes it easier. And I'll fish the docks at night. The banks up by the inlet, when you get up towards Matanzas Inlet, you can catch a lot of good fish off the banks. Read the water, look for bait jumping on the bank or birds around there. There's a good chance there could be a school of fish on the bank there. The thing is with fishing inshore, fishing in general, is reading the water, just looking at the water. See, I mean, if there's nothing moving, there's probably nothing there. But if you're seeing bait, birds diving, there's a good chance there's some fish over there. So that's a good way of trying it, because it's a long river, so it's hard to be like, yeah, so what bank do I fish on? You know, you got to visually look for the signs. Bait, birds. Yeah, so and then at nighttime, all those docks have lights off in the water. And you could actually come up to a dock light and you'll see the fish at the top of the water. And really the best thing to throw at them, I think, is just a free line shrimp. If you have a free line shrimp, nothing's going to refuse that if they're sitting in the lights like that. And then I'll fish the bridges every once in a while. But like I said, slack tide to me, I'm not saying it's better fishing. I'm just saying you can keep your bait in that strike zone a lot longer. And that's a big deal. The little details helps a lot with fishing here. And in like the docks, in the docks you catch sheep's head, black drum, snapper. And if you're going after sheep, there's a lot of sheep's head and black drum. And I usually, if I'm fishing for sheep's head, I'll use fiddler crabs, sand fleas, or shrimp on a little jig head. And just pretty much dropping them down the poles of the front of the dock. But doing that in the ICW can be tough when the water's running. Like I said, slack tide is the main thing. And then I'll fish the creeks. When you fish the creeks, the creek mouths come out to the ICW. That's another good, you can sit on off the ICW in the creek mouths. And usually the first 3 hours of incoming, or the last 3 hours of outgoing and the first 3 hours of incoming, it's usually that's the tide I like to fish, because you got the lower water. The higher the water, the tougher it could be fishing here. So the lower the water is usually the better the fishing, because they're not all spread out. And then moving on to the flats, with the flats you got to be careful here, because it's all tidal flats. So if you have, the best way to learn how to fish shallow water creeks and flats is go in at the low incoming. If you can get in at low incoming, then you can get out. Because the last thing you want to do is go in there at the last 3 hours of outgoing, and you got in, right? And all of a sudden you can't get out, and you got to spend another 3.5 hours to wait for that water to come in. And when you're fishing the flats, because most of our flats are on the west bank here. And if you get you say it's an outgoing tide and it's a hard west wind, it'll blow more water out and you'll lose a lot more water and you could be stuck in there for a while. But when I fish the flats, I like to go, especially this time of spring and summer, I like to be out there like 6:15, 6:30 and then back at the dock by 9:30 because it just gets too hot. But the first thing, if it's a good tide, when I say a good tide, it's a good income and low tide, where the water's nice and low. I can visually see redfish and stuff moving around. And what I'll do first thing in the morning when I go on a flat, especially this time of year, is throw a top water till the sun comes up. Because that's like this time of the year, if you could throw one of these, it's very exciting. But you have to practice with it because you have to have, a lot of people can't do it because you got to make sure you're having that click clack. But the excitement of when a redfish eats one of these things in like 8 inches of water, it's pretty cool. It's worth it. I mean, even if you just get one out of like 2 hours of fishing, who cares? It's worth it. And then once the sun comes up on the flat, I'll switch to a jerk bait. It's a scented bait, but like I said, when I get on the flat, I'm looking. You want to look and just watch the water. And if you're seeing, like I said, mullet, a lot of times on a flat, when a fish is eating mullet, the mullet's just going to spread out. Because right now we have the spring mullet run, so we have a lot of these little mullet coming in. And if you can find the mullet right now, that's where you're going to find the fish. The mullet aren't everywhere right now. There's certain spots. And if you're on a flat and you're seeing mullet on a bank just like jumping out of the water crazy, that's where the fish are. There's something over there eating. And a lot of times on our flats, we have the oyster bars, and that's mainly where the fish will like to be. But at certain times, they'll sit out in the middle of the flat. So the thing is, if you want to learn how to fish a flat, you pick one. I suggest you pick one and you fish it. If you push pole, I don't know if you have a kayak, boat, or whatever, just push pole or kayak and just try to be standing and just look. Just keep watching the water. And because some fish, there'll be a school of fish that'll post up right in the middle of the flat, and you'll never think of that because all the oyster bars are on the bank, and you're going to think all the fish are going to be around the structure there, you know. But a lot of times they're just sitting out in the middle. And a lot of times you go on the shallow water flat, and the redfish aren't even moving around; they're just laid up. And the top water, the artificials, that won't work. So a lot of times we'll get mullet, cut them up, crab, blue crab, cut them up, shrimp, mud minnows, ladyfish, pinfish, any of those baits. Like a day like today, I'm not throwing artificials. If I had to go out there and fish, I'm going to get bait and cut it up and soak it around oyster bars. And when I mean by soaking, I'll chunk them, and I'll use a J hook. You can also use circle hook, but I'll mainly use a jig head. And I'll chunk up the mullet in pieces like that and just put the jig head in there and pick your favorite oyster bar, wherever you've seen them, the day before or 2 days before. Spread out some chunks, like 2 to 3 rods, just spread them out. Don't put it all in the same spot. And just give it 15 minutes. If you don't have a fish in 15, 20 minutes, go to your next spot. Go to your next oyster bar. You just got to, a lot of times here in this area, you got to keep moving. You got to keep moving a lot. Like if you're fishing a spot for 20 to 30 minutes, you're there too long. And you haven't caught anything, you're there too long. Find something else. This time of the year, you get a lot more fish coming in. I've seen Spanish mackerel, jacks. The tarpon should start coming in. So I notice everybody wants to go out to redfish here. That's like the main thing. And we have so many other good fish that you can go out there. You have the snook, you have trout, you have, I know the jacks aren't good eating, but they're fun to fight. Spanish mackerel could be good eating. There's a bunch of them that have coming in. You have the tarpon, you have the black drum, sheep's head. I've caught 18 different species of fish in one day in the canals here. So there's more than just redfish to go after. Because I think the redfish have really been hit pretty hard in the past year. But we're still catching. We're still catching them. We're catching a lot of 16, 17 inches, which is a good thing. That means it's reproduced. You know, we had hopefully next year, 2 years down the road, it'll come back. The population will come back. So the earlier you get out there, and throw the top water. And you don't have to have, this top water is called a skitter walk. And that's walking a dog where it goes back and forth like that. And then you have chug bugs. And chug bugs use a little bit easier to throw because you don't have to have that finesse like you do with that top water. Chug bug kind of looks like this. It's a lure, but it has and it pushes the water and you just pop it. So a lot of times when the water's real high, I'll get on the grass line on a flat and throw top water, or not popping corks on the grass line. Because the water's so high, you want to make noise. It's like a dinner bell. You got to call them out of the grass. But I like using this popping cork better than everybody likes this, but I like this right here because it's more of a natural sound to me. And plus I could take it off without cutting line. See that one right there, you got to tie it to your line. This one, if you don't want it, you can just pop it out. And then you can free line. And if you want to put it back on, and those are like $4 or $5. These are like 99 cents. So and you can just throw it right back on like that. And then you can adjust it if you need to adjust it, like if you get in deeper water and you want more line, you can bring it up. If you're in shallow water, you want to bring it down, you can bring it down. That, you're going to have to cut line and retie it every time. When you know where Bing's Landing is? When you go out of Bing's Landing and you're in that main river, and say you're headed north, right, towards Matanzas, and you look to your left, you see little bays. To your left, you'll see like little pockets and little bays. That's our shallow water flats. And then and every creek will lead you out to a little flat.